everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. We have so much to discuss today, including the fact that the media wants us to think that Queen Camilla refused to hold First Lady Brigitte Macron's hand. But what really happened? King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Prince William and Princess Anne went to D-Day commemorations, and the media tried to stir up drama between Queen Camilla and France's First Lady. But before we get to that, it was lovely to see King Charles and the rest there. They all looked lovely, and I especially like what Camilla chose to wear. It's a very flattering cut for her, and it really reminds me of the whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it thing, because the late Queen Elizabeth II had a sort of uniform for all her public appearances and official duties as queen. It often included a coat and a dress or a skirt suit of some kind. It was typically in a very tried and true silhouette. The general design of the garments was something that she knew worked well for her and her petite frame, and it also allowed her to really bring variety through color and pattern, as well as other touches like jewelry or hats and accessories. Rather than playing around with various cuts of her outfits to add interest, which can get really dicey because not every cut is for every body. But it would seem that Queen Camilla has adopted a rather similar strategy. These style of dresses and coats are clearly her go-to, and they suit her very well. She's made her own uniform of sorts, and it's really a smart option for her. She's rather busty and has suffered some back pain, so this really allows for flexibility in accommodating those needs and concerns. And these designs often have contoured stitching across the front, which help to accentuate her waist, which is really important if you're more busty, because you can lean into frumpy way too easily. It's a very slippery slope and risky game. It's much more flattering to define the waist somehow, and at her age, with her back pains and whatnot, she might not feel very comfortable with something super form-fitting, so instead by having that stitching, it really prevents the frump from coming through, so I think it works really nicely for her. And again, it allows her to play around with color and pattern and stitching, embroidery, embellishments, things like that, and of course, celebrate her fabulous hats. Queen Camilla is the queen of hats. Fabulous hats, as always, and King Charles looked great. It's really great to see him out there doing things that mean a lot to him. He always seems so pleased to be able to be there, so it was very heartwarming and wonderful. But on to the drama. Here is the clip. And you can see that the First Lady is really struggling to lay down her wreath here. And after laying the wreath, out of respect, this is pretty universal, no matter the country or culture that you come from, you generally wouldn't turn your back to the memorial and the wreath you just laid. You would want to stay facing it in a moment like this. And that's, like I said, pretty much everybody follows that protocol. And so you can see that Queen Camilla is prepared and begins to back up at this point, but the First Lady is a tad flustered from her squirrely wreath, and she starts to turn. And so what I see here is that she's sort of reaching for Camilla's hand to regain her position and sort of get back into her stance for this moment of silence. And so while Camilla doesn't reach out to take her hand, it was an unexpected gesture, she also doesn't pull away either. And then it is the First Lady who drops her hand, like literally as soon as they're a few steps back, to give their moment of silence for respect. And then they return to King Charles and President Macron. So I really do think that she was just flustered and trying to sort of get back on track. And I don't think that Queen Camilla snubbed her. This was so fast. It was so split second. So as per usual, the media is really trying to drum up some clicks, and everybody's just hopped on the bandwagon. There is real documented warmth between these couples. They seem to get on fine, and in moments like these, if something isn't going as planned, cue the wreath. All you think is everybody's eyes are on me. I'm bent over trying to fix this wreath, and then I'm supposed to back up. I'm in high heels. You know, mistakes happen. Moving on. The current discussion surrounding the Sussexes is, was that Nigeria trip really just a campaign to basically advertise to the royal family? A lot of people believe that when Harry and Meghan realized the royal family was temporarily short-staffed, so to speak, that this was their time to pounce, and they threw this trip together really rapidly to get out there and prove that they can do royal tours and be assets to the monarchy. Well, obviously it backfired because it was a terrible display in literally every way. I can't think of any positives that have come from that trip at all, but I do think that this theory has legs. I have always said that Megxit was a big fat bluff. Harry and Meghan were not getting their way. They were not happy being second and, all of those sorts of things. They wanted to do things differently, and they had lots of ideas, and they weren't really being received super great by the monarchy at the time because technically they were noobs, and they thought that if they left and made a big stink about it, that they would be asked back with greater bargaining power, that they would be able to have more say in the sorts of projects they did, more freedoms, things like that, on more equal footing with William and Catherine, for example. And when that didn't work, they did Oprah, and that was sort of their Hail Mary. They thought that would force the hand of the monarchy, really at the time, Queen Elizabeth II, that it would really get to her, and she would ask them back and do whatever it took to make things right, that it would be that sort of a scenario that would play out. That is what Harry and Meghan genuinely thought would happen. And when it still didn't, then they finally gave in and did all these tell-all deals. The point is that they thought each time that they'd really be asked back and get their way, that this would be the time that the royal family saw the error of their ways. But the royal family expertly, magnificently called their bluff every single time. So it is quite possible that one element to the Nigeria trip was designed to show the monarchy and hoping for that outcome of being asked back to help out, because as we have seen, Harry and Meghan have not achieved the success or the status that they thought they would in America, and are surely, on some level, regretful of what they did and the choices they made, because it's not working out so great. It's a lot harder than you think. Now, while that didn't necessarily pan out the way they thought it would, what Nigeria did do was show Harry that being the runner-up, the third most senior, at the time of Megxit, fourth most senior royal family couple, is and was way better than being fake royals and fake celebrities. Harry and Meghan were captain of the B team, which might not sound great in a lot of situations, but in this situation it really was. The A team is the monarch and the direct heirs. The B team is literally everybody else who supports them and works for the monarchy, and Harry and Meghan were kind of the top dogs of that crew of people at the time. And they threw it all away. When you compare, like, for example, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, Princess Anne, Catherine and William, when they do tours or trips abroad, it's so much more polished, it's so much more organized and well presented and well received, and it gets much better press than Harry and Meghan did in Nigeria. And it's not just that it's better PR, it's also more comfortable for the representative in question, whomever it is that's gone on tour or on a trip, when it's well organized, when you know what to expect. Things are not chaotic and crowded. You can be on your A game. You can really be present. You can enjoy it better and do a better job and engage more genuinely and have a better time. It's more fun and easier when it's all well coordinated and planned out carefully the way the royals do it. So it's clear Harry and Meghan, they didn't have the best time. And one reason for the unorganized structure of their trip is fully their own fault. It did feel very hastily put together, which would lend itself to that theory that it was kind of this last minute, like, hey, this is our chance to show them what they're missing, let's do it, and then they'll ask us back to help out type of vibe. But whether or not it was actually rushed in the planning process, it's clear that the planning itself was very subpar. Those who are higher in narcissistic traits tend to grossly overestimate their own abilities while also underestimating the actual work and difficulty of the things in front of them. So Harry and Meghan likely did think, fully confidently, that they could throw their own royal tour. How hard could it be, after all? Prince Harry's been on several and the Meg's been on, well, 2. So of course they're basically experts. The amount of work it takes and people it takes to put on a successful tour is unimaginable. Monarchy also has decades of experience to have learned from and reference to know how to do things right and to avoid mistakes. They've made the mistakes already and learned from them. They have staff with specialized knowledge. They hire experts if need be to be able to make these tours and trips and events overseas as seamless and glossy as possible. So for Harry and Meghan to have thought that they could do this on their own is yet another example of their irrationally overinflated egos. And it really showed. The tour came off like a cluster duck, and it just didn't go well. A big part of that was lack of organization and staff. Another contributing factor was Meghan's disdain for protocol. She's always had disdain for select protocol. She likes some of it. Allegedly, she likes being curtsied to. They like being called ma'am and sir and duke and duchess. But they disliked, Meghan at least disliked, letting the blood royal go first or lead anything, ever. As many of you have pointed out, she tries to lean on the ladies first protocol, but that doesn't really work when you're barging in front of other people. She's pushing old Harold out of the way right and left. She's leaning into or literally stepping in front of him to go first. And it equally wouldn't work if a guy was pushing and barging and elbowing in front of a lady to go first. It's not a guy-girl thing. It's an anybody thing. Anybody who's literally pushing someone out of the way to go first looks like a dick. It really only works if one person is chill and calm and letting the other lead, and protocol solves that. When you see Catherine and William, or Charles and Camilla, or Sophie and Edward, any of these couples, the late Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were experts at this. There's zero question, zero confusion, zero chaos. The blood royal leads, generally speaking. I mean, not 100% of the time. There are times where it organically unfolds differently, but it's natural when it does happen because the spouse is not operating with an agenda to literally try to get to be first the way we saw with Meghan time and time again and still see with Meghan. They're just being normal and having good manners. No other royal spouse who has married into any royal family has ever caused quite this much trouble. And I agree with those of you who have said that Meghan Markle clearly mistook all the attention that she got early on as an interest in herself, like her personally, her as a human being, rather than simply a spouse, like interest in whomever Prince Harry would have chosen to marry. That person, that slot in the family tree was going to get attention and interest because they're the prince's fiance. It really went to her head and ended up making her look like an absolute fool. And I think this is also absolutely correct because part of her problem is that she does attempt to be different in every situation. In any setting, if she's meant to be more polished or professional, she will show up underdressed. If she's meant to look more casual, she'll be overdressed. And this is common in many groups of people. We've all dealt with it at time to time in our regular lives, seeing somebody who's really unaware or socially awkward or attention seeking or defiant. They're always dressing in a way that doesn't quite fit the bill for the occasion. I agree with those of you who say that this whole experience, ever since he got with Meghan, has been extraordinarily jarring for Harry. He's been in uncharted waters ever since when it comes to the public opinion of him. He was used to almost exclusive praise and a PR team that was really skilled and had cultivated good relationships with between palace staff and representatives and journalists, but also cover-ups. They covered up his bad behaviors and his fumbles a lot. Now, Prince Harry has gone from being a sort of darling when it came to journalists and headlines to almost exclusively negative, something he likely never even fathomed would be possible. And it's probably been nearly impossible for him to grasp. Rumor has it that Prince Harry has been house hunting in the UK. Some believe the blind items that says it has everything to do with separating from Meghan Markle. I don't see that as likely in the near future. Just based off of the controlling and spiteful nature of their union, I think neither of them are ready for their marriage to fail just yet. It would prove far too many people right if they called it quits at this point. However, we must not forget the Councillor of State issue where Prince Harry is actually required to have domicile in the UK in order to continue to hold that role. And perhaps he caught wind that it would be reconsidered. Since Prince Harry listed his home country as the United States upon being evicted from Frogmore, he has waded into some gray area and created a problem for himself. It's a gray area, but perhaps it's a contributing factor for his need for a UK residence. I'm also not 100% confident that it has anything to do with his friends not being willing to visit him in the United States, because Why would anybody want to go and visit Harry in the UK or in the United States when Harry tends to just make stuff up and put it out in the press and give interviews all the time about every private conversation he's ever had? I don't think anybody is very interested in spending time with people like that. The Nigeria trip brought us lots of pouty, sad Harry faces, and a lot of people think Harold looks like he's going through a really rough time rather than just being unhappy or petulant. Why do people think this? Because the Meg has been essentially attacking everyone and everything Harold has known his entire life as essentially wrong and unacceptable. And Harry, let's be honest here, was really quite sheltered. Yes, he traveled quite a bit, but honestly, he wasn't learning to operate independently in the real world, where he could have learned to be more discerning of manipulative people. He's been coddled, he's been helped, he's had servants his whole life, gone to private schools, etc. So he is, in theory, more vulnerable, more prone to believing or being confused by these sorts of manipulative tactics, more so than somebody who has more street smarts, for lack of a better phrase. Really, for anybody who lacks street smarts, but in this case for Harry, to have Meg at every turn telling him just how screwed up this world that he comes from is, when it's not, that would become confusing and overwhelming and cause anger. And it's a pattern that a lot of people recognize because they've experienced it in their own lives with toxic people. They recognize these elements in Harry and Meghan's dynamic. But at the same time, he's made many poor choices on his own accord, so not everybody is on board with the victim Harry mode, but let me know what you think in the comments. And those who do still feel bad for Harold tend to think that he really did want privacy, that he truly does care about people. I think two things can be true at the same time. He's mad that things didn't work out how he wanted them to. He's disappointed, but also angry at everybody who he thinks is to blame for it. He thought that once he got married, his position would elevate, and that snowballed to where he and the Meg wanted to be equals, and that was never going to happen. So he's mad that that didn't work, and he's mad things didn't go how he wanted them to. But he was also sold on a private life by the Meg, one that was more Hollywood and glitzy and celebrity. And that hasn't worked out either, which has compounded his frustration. False impressions given and empty promises is something that's very typical in more toxic relationships. So it's clear that the Meg, who didn't have much pull in Hollywood and was a relatively unknown actress, very small scale role and whatnot before getting with Harry, may have overpromised and is under-delivering on the whole US private, more celebrity sort of lifestyle. And at the same time, Harold may have overpromised and underdelivered on what being a royal really would be like. A lot of you have asked me whether or not I think Meghan sees the videos of herself, the criticisms, or just simply watches clips from moments like this. And if so, why there has been no improvement in her behaviors or mannerisms. I do think that she sees the videos. She and Harry, it's no secret, are quite obsessed with their media coverage. So it would be a stretch to think that they don't go through the internet, comb through looking for articles and clips posted. But people who are unaware and self-absorbed are usually spin masters. They spin everything in the most twisted of ways to their advantage, no matter what. And if they hit a wall and they can't spin something adequately, then it's the other people's problem. They're just plain wrong or biased or whatever. The press has been all abuzz about Trooping the Color and the fact that Harry and Meghan were not invited for the second year in a row. Why would they be invited? It would make no sense to invite them. Why invite them? But for Trooping the Color coverage and all those who did get invited and show up, be sure to subscribe so you do not miss my upcoming video featuring Trooping the Color and some of the best fashions we've gotten to see. Thank you very much for joining me for today's video, and I will see you next time. Bye!